All right, welcome one and all to AutoCrit 101. We are back for another week, and today we are going to be talking about alpha reading, and we're going to talk about reverse outlining, the first steps of developmental editing. So we have been through the planning phase already. There are replays of these past lives in our AutoCrit 101 series. If you're watching on YouTube, that will be in our playlist. So we've already done planning, and we have already talked about drafting and the tools you have. And so today we're going to talk about the tools AutoCrit has available to help you do developmental editing. Developmental editing is the portion of editing where you focus on your story's content. So plot, pacing, world building, characters, and all of that. As we go through today, if you have questions for me or for Valentina, who is helping me in the chat, drop them in the sidebar. I'm so excited though. I am a developmental editor by trade. So we've split this session into 2 weeks. Today, we're going to be talking about alpha reading and reverse outlining. Next week, we'll talk about what you do with all of that data. But as a friendly reminder, none of AutoCrit's tools, which includes the editorial AI-driven tools we're looking at today, are allowed to train on your work. They are not going to generate content for your work. Your work is safely, securely yours. And unless you choose to share it somewhere else, like in the public forums, nobody's going to see it but you, which is actually one of the benefits to using AutoCrit for your developmental editing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Now we need to edit a book. At this phase, many people come to me and go, when do I start doing developmental edits on my book? And I have a couple different answers. The first is going to be when the book is completely written, you finish the first draft, you have a clear beginning, middle, end, and you're ready to touch it up, polish it up, fill in any holes, make sure there's no inconsistencies, and then get it on to the rest of the editing for your readers. The other time you might do what we're doing in this class today is if you get stuck somewhere, your inspiration leaves partway through writing your story. Instead of starting over, which is time consuming and frustrating and demotivating, you could come in and do these kinds of edits to see what you have, to get a clear picture. And in doing so, you'll have an idea of where your story went wrong, and you can pick it up and move on from there, or you'll get a clear picture of where it needs to go. So we're going to show you how you would do that. I am going to be showing one of my personal pieces. This is one of my most recent books. And I'm also going to show you how to use these tools to sort scenes that are not written in order into chapters, sort of that first phase. And speaking of that, it's a great segue into realizing that your writing style is going to affect how you approach editing altogether. Where are my planners? Kat Campbell's team planner for novel 90, or people who like to have all their outlines, character sketches, world building details in a nice, neat row. All right, we got a lot of planners, planners, planners. Yes, hooray for planners. And then we have planters, people who outline some or maybe don't outline, but they have a good idea of where they go in their story and where their characters are supposed to go in the story. And then they free write the rest. These would be our planters, the people in between. We got a whole bunch of people. All right, and then team pantser. If the very word outline gave you shivers just now, you are a pantser. These are the people like myself, I'm the coach of Team Pantser here, who open a blank document because you had a cool dream last night and you're going to figure out where the dream goes. And we write in order to discover what happens. So the term pantser is often interchanged with discovery writer because we're discovering the story, but it's exciting. No matter what style you have, it's not wrong. It's just how your creativity works. But you have potential pitfalls in your editing. And if you can pin that to the back of your mind as you go into this, it can help you not sabotage yourself as you go along. So first up, planners. Planners are typically confident going into editing. They're confident because they have a good outline and they know it. And they expect their story to be pretty much waterproof because of that good outline. But because nobody's execution, nobody, not even Kat, after 300 plus book, has a perfect first draft, when they see the key plot hole error, the inconsistency, the character stuff that doesn't match up to other books in the series, instead of wanting to fix it, they're tempted to chunk the whole thing because a lot of planners think this is an outline problem. Obviously, if I had planned for this better, I would have written it better. So now the whole book needs to be redone. Planners also tend to struggle to accept their rough drafts for that reason. They are the most likely to want perfection out of a first draft whose only job is to exist. They are their own worst critics. And sometimes they're reluctant to take outside feedback seriously because they're their own worst critic. No way can you look at this harsher than I'm looking at it myself. Therefore, whatever you say is diminished in value. So planners, as we go into our editing phases here in AutoCrit, look to reverse outlines to help you fix the plot problems. Don't look to a new outline to fix the problem. Allow your work to be imperfect. Incorporate that rough period that is supposed to be there as part of your editing plan. Kat says she embraces her chaos draft. Dust it off, give it a new shade of paint, and it's going to look great. Let your story breathe a bit to approach it with fresh eyes and less self-criticism if you can. And ask yourself if your message actually comes out the way it was intended, or if this is something that a reader takes differently. And this last point is for when you get feedback you weren't expecting. Is it a disconnect in how a reader receives what you wrote instead of how you actually wrote it? Planters. Depending on whether the book is complete or not, when you start your editing, there might be a editing cycle, or we call it analysis paralysis temptation sitting there, which means you stopped writing, you went to see what you've written so far to sort it out, and in the process, you noticed all these problems that need to be fixed. And instead of making them wait to fix them because you're going to have to edit them later, you start fixing them then, and then you never get past that section. You're stuck in this analysis paralysis around and around and around doing the same thing. They can be easily influenced into incorporating concepts or changing their story based on feedback or new things they learn mid-writing. And then that compounds the editing cycle analysis paralysis because then, oh, I just took this writing workshop on narrative tension, showing versus telling, dialogue. Now I've got to go back and fix all this other stuff. And again, it's halting progress instead of just implementing it, moving forward, and fixing the rest when we get to editing. They can become fixated on keeping the very few key plot points or character elements exactly as they intended because they have so few of them compared to the full-on outliners that they don't want to release those elements. And sometimes that can straddle your progress and keep your characters from growing the way they need to grow. So planters, if any of these are familiar to you, consider these tips. Consider a structured approach to editing. This is where reverse outlining helps planters. You get to go through the reverse outline once. You get to make one round of revisions, and then you have to go forward. You don't get to go back anymore. This is going to let you make forward momentum and still satisfy that need to go back and fix something that's really getting to you at the same time. Focus on polishing your own work and vision before sharing with other people. That way you're not tempted to incorporate a whole bunch of random ideas and end up lost because those things, as great as they are and as helpful as they can be, are part of what's keeping your core elements from going where you wanted them to go. And then allow your story the permission to change. Even the key elements, if it really does make the story stronger, you can start a separate file, do a save as, make a different version of the file, and play around with that other idea and go, what if I did change the love interest? What if I did keep this character alive? What if I did give the villain a redemption arc that I wasn't planning on doing? And just play with it a minute and see how that flows, and you might like it better. And then pantsers. I saved us for last, but we're not immune to the editing style weaknesses either. Many pantsers put off starting editing because we know it's going to be a mess. I am a pantser and I'm looking out at my pantsers and I'm saying, we know it's a mess. If we can celebrate our creative chaos, and we take it and incorporate our flexibility that we are so good at into this, it knocks off some of that fear. But we often stall and we get to the editing thing, and the squirrels running around with other story ideas become a lot more attractive than sitting down and having to write this, and we abandon our first draft. The developmental editing phase, especially, is going to tempt us to quit because that is the most intensive phase. It is the one that we have to use to restructure the work that maybe we didn't write in chronological order. It's the phase that requires the most revisions. So this is going to be the one where if you can make it past, you're downhill. This is the peak of our Everest. We tend to add and revise content quite easily because our ideas are flexible, but that also makes us a little bit open to other people's influence, like our plants or friends. We may look for too many opinions to fix our first draft as a result. And until we develop a good, strong voice of our own, that makes it easy for other people's voices to come in and dilute ours and dilute our vision. It doesn't mean that your work can't get constructive criticism from other people. It means that you need to already have an idea of what you want it to look like in the end before you incorporate work from other people. So, pantsers, you need to approach editing like you did writing. Hold your breath, dive in, swim as fast as you can, because just like when we dove in on the drafting and we knew the motivation was going to leave at some point, we're going to dive into the editing. And if we can get through it quick, like that Band-Aid being ripped off, it's over. And then it's downhill with line and copy edits. And those, I guarantee you, we can handle. Break the developmental editing process into smaller chunks that are easier to work through. Try to self-edit your piece first using tips from this class, and then limit your feedback requests to 1 or 2 people when you first start out, and look for the things they agree on. And we'll talk about that later today. So the first step that many people, especially first-time authors, go to when doing these levels of edits is alpha reading. Alpha reading is for readers to look at your book when it is not edited in any capacity, just to tell you if all the core elements you need are there. They're the ones that say, oh yeah, you want this to be a dark fantasy book? It has all the things that make it seem like a dark fantasy book. If you pretend that your book is a box of dinosaur bones and you bring it to a paleontologist and you push it across the table and they shuffle through them and they go, oh yeah, it looks like you've got like a T-Rex here. That's a relief. The T-Rex is not assembled. The T-Rex is not pretty. The T-Rex is not ready to display anywhere. You just have its bones. That is what this alpha read is like. You're bringing the alpha reader a box of your book ideas and they're looking through it and they're going, oh yeah, this looks like it could be a good insert genre here. That is what those readers are for. They're not helping you line your stuff up. That's for reverse outlining. They're giving you a big picture level. You can find alpha readers on reader groups, writer communities, professional sites like Upworks, Fiverr, or Readsy, or from word of mouth recommendation from friends. When you get feedback from those people, remember this is an analysis phase. This is not an editing phase. You're taking their feedback to make sure your book has all the key pieces, and then that lets you decide what genre do you want to pitch this as. If you've ever been in woodwork or sewing, you know the phrase, measure twice before you cut, right? Measure twice, cut once. That is so you don't mess up because you can't undo it once it's been done. Same thing here. Before you start cutting, before you start changing, notate. We need to look at the full piece, notate. That's our measuring, that's our assessing, and then that gives us a picture. So we don't waste time revising something early on and then deciding, oh, you know what? I don't even want that character to be the love interest anymore. And now I have to undo everything I just did. We're wanting to be efficient here. So use the feedback to launch your reverse outline and put key features of your story that you want to focus on in that front and center spot, but don't make changes yet. If you're sitting there going, what if I'm not ready for another human to read my book? Then you are not alone. If you are not ready for another human to read your book, you can use AutoCrit's alpha readers. These are pro member tools that you could use. They are editorial AI. They won't train on your work. They're not going to write anything for you. They're here to give you an analysis, just like a human alpha reader would. So I'm going to show you how you would create a AutoCrit alpha reader and how they work so you can give it a try on your own stories if you'd like. I'm going to go into my writer's desk. We've been here the last couple weeks, and I'm going to upload a file. Now, I have a file that I want to show you guys from scratch because I know a lot of you are here looking at AutoCrit for the very first time. So I have my file, and as you can see, this file has formatting in it. Before you bring over anything in AutoCrit from outside, it needs to be stripped down to the bare bones. You need to get rid of any formatting. The easiest way to do this is click your mouse anywhere in the file once, hit the Control A button or Command A or Command Shift A, depending on your device. And at the top of your toolbar up here, you'll see this Normal button. I'm going to click Normal, and that's going to get rid of all my non-typed formatting. It leaves things, as you can see here, like my italics, my em dashes, my ellipses, anything I manually typed. If I had manually typed my indents, it would have kept those. If you just use the system automated ones, which is inserting things with formatting, those will come out. And it just strips it down to this nice, clean version of the file. Make sure too that you go into Insert and get rid of any headers or footers. You would just go to that and click Remove Page Number, Remove Footer, and then you also get rid of your hyperlinks or anything else. We're just cleaning it out. And you can do this just in those 3 clicks. So highlight everything, click Normal, get rid of the footers, get rid of the headers, get rid of the page numbers, and make sure you don't have hyperlinks or images of any kind, and you should be good to go. So I'm just going to save this file. I'm going to show you what happens when I drag and drop it into AutoCrit. I'm bringing it from outside of AutoCrit. I'm going to click the Upload button. So you could either write from AutoCrit or copy and paste with that Add File, or you can click the Upload button and then drag and drop your file from wherever you have it saved on your computer. So I'm going to save this one that you guys just saw right here, and it's going to open on its own. And here I have my nice pretty file, no formatting, it's ready to go. Once you have your file in the system, there's a couple things you will need to do. You have to tell the system where your chapters are. Most of you are going to write with chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. If that's you, this chapter drop down up here at the top is where you're going to go. You're going to click the drop down and you're going to click Auto Find Chapters at the top. You're not going to click Analyze by Chapter at the bottom. I will show you what those are for in a couple weeks when we get to line editing. So we're going to click Auto Find Chapters, and it will find those chapters for you. I don't write in chapters. I write in scenes, and I don't write in order. So at some point, these are going to have to be adjusted. What I do instead is find my scene titles, the Vault Doors Voice, and I click this plus sign at the top after I highlight them. So highlight, and then go up here to the plus sign, and it will give you the option to save that as a chapter. And no, it's not a full chapter on its own, but the system just calls it a chapter. So I'm going to skim down here and look for my scene names. And I usually put a couple manual spaces after my chapters just to make this easier for myself. But save the chapter, and it's going to start building a chapter list or scene list in my case. Here are all my scenes right now. And in these scenes, I'm doing a quick skim for word count. The words have to be between 200 and 10,000 words per chapter, what it is analyzed, or in this case, scenes. If it is under 200 words, you need to temporarily combine it with a different one. If it's over 10,000 words, you need to temporarily split it up and give them two separate names so that they don't have the same name back to back, or that will confuse the system. So here's what I have. These are all fine. I am going to head to the analysis tab here. And because this is a fiction piece, I am going to click on the fiction analyzer. At this point, it doesn't matter what you have selected over here, because this bit is for the line and copy edits, the algorithmic reports in our system that aren't powered by editorial AI. What we're using is smart enough to figure out your genre on its own. So you're going to click on the fiction analyzer. And at this point, I'm going to pause and ask and just take a poll for a quick second. How many of you already know who your ideal reader is? You have an idea of what kind of genre you're writing, who would like your book. And you can find out by going to Market Fuel instead of starting with the Alpha Reader. And in that Market Fuel tab, there's a analysis, the very top box, this market analysis and similar books file. Run those two things. It will read what you've written, and it will tell you that it thinks this book would be good for this demographic of people and these genres and why. And if you agree with that, that gives you starting information about who your audience is. You need that for when you create your alpha reader. It will also give you comp books, which is nifty because then you can say in that alpha reader setting who the comps are for these readers. So you can see comps to this story here: Semlin Ascends, Perdido Street Station, The Mechanical Leviathan, Lies of Luck, Lamora, and up here at the top, I've got my target audience, adult and older YA who like dark character-driven fantasy, steampunk and clockwork fans. And these are all examples. So these give you a starting space to make sure that you are building a reader that is representative of these audiences before you get editorial feedback from them. So once you know who you're writing for, come back to Alpha Reader and click Select Your Reader here. At the bottom, or if you've never been in here before, it'll be at the top, we have built a bunch of starter templates for you guys. These templates are meant to be a beginning foundation for how you build a reader. So for example, if I come down through here and I wanted to say, oh, this one's fantasy, I'm going to click Create This Reader. But I'm not going to use it as is, because as great as it is, it's really good for general fantasy. This is a very specific niche. This is steampunk, science, fantasy. So I need to adjust it to make it relevant. To make this personal, it's a steampunk, science, fantasy reader. And I'm going to read through the profile that is here and get an idea of things that I need to change to make it better for my audience. I read fantasy for wonder plus consequences, worlds that feel lived in, magic with real costs, science that isn't too technical or jargon filled, and characters whose choices reshape the map. I'm drawn to fresh lore, clear rules, even for soft magic, and prose that orients me without dumping encyclopedias in my lap. When I beta read, I track entry points, how the world's logic drives conflict, and whether the beats are cinematic yet easy to follow. Now, this could be a place where you say things like, I want a dark, romantic element to this piece, but no on the page spice. Or you could say you want it, or you want it to be graphic and gory if you're writing dark horror, right? And then you get to scroll down, and there will be a bunch of questions in here. Because our readers are not allowed to train on your work, you can't ask it questions after it does the read. You need to think about questions before it does the read. And this is a good exercise if you plan to do an alpha or beta read for actual humans. At some point, you have to come up with a questionnaire or something up front and then send it with the book to them. So think about, what do you want them to answer? And you can put those questions in here for your reader. You can also go down to the very bottom and adjust your content boundaries. Each of our reader templates are built with standard boundaries, but you don't have to keep them this way. So if you're writing a dark piece or a horror piece, you can adjust things like violence and gore, the steamy, spicy content, mind control use, and all the way down it goes. Be sure to adjust this, my spicy romance peeps and my horror peeps. You've got to make sure that it's matching both in the bottom and in summary at the top for this to work. Once you have your ideal reader, you don't have to build it again and again and again. As you can see here, I have this section called Saved Readers, and it has all these different penguin types. And so I'm going to say I want my fantasy reader, but a dark fantasy version, to read this work. You can load several different penguins, as we affectionately call them, into your reader at any given time. I'm going to go ahead and start this reader running here. There is a first read drop down box. This is for additional context, like this. This is the first 10,000 words of a full-length novel. Please do not look at this as though it's a complete story. So that would be a element. I'm going to have it start reading. We've run this through. What I personally would do at this point with the automated alpha readers is run it 2 to 3 times. And here's what I'm looking for. We're notating, we're not revising yet. I am looking for why it gives the score it does. There is a why section. I picked intrigued. I am looking, okay, they've got all these things they like. And then there's a however, uneven POV shifts, exposition clumps, and occasional clarity failures keep me from calling it exemplary. That makes sure strong ideas and uneven execution is why the story quality sits in the mid-60s. It's promising, watchable, not firing on all cylinders. So if I wanted to save this as an actionable note, there's actually a save to note button here in the middle, and I'm going to save it there. And then I'm going to run this same reader again, because you've created, when you create this part up here, a group of personas. And dark fantasy is huge. If Becca and Kat and I all read dark fantasy romance, we are all going to come out with a different opinion of the exact same book. But there are foundational issues that all three of us catch no matter what our personal preference is. When you run it through multiple times on that first read level, you get different personas' opinions. And then when you do it 2 or 3 times, you see which points they all say. Those are the points you note for dev editing, not the little details that are subjective to I want more chaos and battles, and Becca wants more steamy time, and Kat wants more of both. You know, those are subjective elements versus foundational. And if you click reread, it will reread your text, but you do need to have made changes for this to really be valuable to you from the same persona that has the current one up on the screen. So I would read it through 2 or 3 times, notate for myself what they say, and then create action plans. That's a good way to get your initial impressions from AutoCrit before you reach out to a human. Now we need to get into reverse outlining. We're going to talk about what a reverse outline is, how you actually do a reverse outline, and what you do once you have a finished one. Reverse outlining is the process of reading your story and breaking it down to make sure that you have a complete plot, a strong pace that isn't slow in places and fast in others, that your world building is immersive, understandable, and consistent, and that your characters are actual people with full developed arcs. You reverse outline a book either by using tools like AutoCrit, which is what we will be showing you today, or utilizing the tried and true spreadsheet and sticky note method. This takes a long time. The spreadsheet that I had is like a bingo board with tons of columns, and it's like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, I found the main character's eye color. That goes here. And I found this character's cousin's aunt's name. That goes there. And then here I describe what the pub served for dinner, and that goes there. It is going to take you a little bit of time, my friends, and a lot of sticky notes. And if you're anything like me, that means your back wall will be looking like a crime scene by the time it's done. Coffee. That may just be me. Tea is fine. We'll accept T as an answer to this question. The purposeful goals that move through each core storytelling element to check each one before you start making changes is the last piece here. So where do you begin with this? Well, you can see my spreadsheet on the left-hand side in this example. You can start there with a book and a whopping helping of coffee alongside your sticky notes, or you could use the AutoCrit reader to do this for you. And let's hop over to AutoCrit and I'll show you in your analysis tab under the fiction or nonfiction analyzer, we are actually going to pivot over to this Analyzer Plus section here. And within there is a Beats and Outline button. You're going to click on that Beats and Outline button, and you're going to choose what kind of story you're writing. Is this a romance? Is it a mystery? Is it a horror? Are you writing an action, adventure, thriller, which would be plot focused? Are you writing literary, contemporary, fantasy, sci-fi, something that's character focused? Any of these can go in here. I'm going to click character focused. Those are how my stories typically go. I'm going to go ahead and click this generate analysis bubble. And this is going to read my story, which as you guys know is out of order, right? Here's all my out of order scenes. They're not even chapters yet. And it's going to tell me which of these scenes looks like it best meets these beats. I have had this come back telling me I don't even have beats, that the beats are blank. They're like, you don't have this yet. You have to go write it. I have had it tell me that your inciting incident is in chapter 14's scene, which means that's the one that needs to get moved to the top. That's in chapter 1 or 2. And it helps me organize everything in combination with Kat, our beloved team planner coach's chapter sandwich. And next week, when we get into developmental editing, I will show you a slide with Kat's permission of her chapter sandwich that walks you through which of these scenes should be in which place. For now, I'm just trying to see what's going on with these different beats. It's reading the story, it's thinking about it. You can see here, it says, my setup, showing what life was like before everything changes. And then it gives me these hashtags. When I click the hashtag, it takes me to the scene it feels is a setup scene. And this scene is tested by the bank owners, which, as luck has it, is actually the opening scene of the final version of this book. So if I was going through here, I would say, oh, okay, that's my setup. Well, then that needs to be dragged and dropped to the top of my file. It's up at the top. What comes next? Characters are introduced, tone and genre, all of these are in that scene. Call to adventure. All right, let's see where that is. We have this scene here where surprisingly, one of her guardian friends ends up no longer there. They are now permanently separated from their body next to her. So if I'm going to move this one, I'm going to drag and drop it up. And now I have scene 1, scene 2, the opening book, the inciting incident. What I'm doing is putting my core beats in the order they appear. And that then allows me to sort the rest out, the rest of my scenes as the bridges between those gaps, right? That is where you see where your bridges are. So this gives you your overview of which beats you have, which beats you don't have, which ones you need to flesh out. And while you're here, you can also check your character arcs, and you can either choose the character manually, or you can let it auto find your character. I suggest running auto on it first because it's a good indicator for what a reader might think your character is, regardless of what you think your character is. So just get this good insight into why it thinks this specific person is the primary main character. So it thinks this is a single POV book. It can detect more than one. It thinks that this is the main character, and it thinks she's the main character because she has clear wants versus needs, but they're misaligned. She has skills, she has flaws, she has desires, and the narrative is following her choices. And if I decided, no, she's not a POV character, I want the magistrate to be the main character, then I'm going to say, this is the magistrate. I'm going to run it here. And I'm going to tell you, this thing has a little bit of snark, but in a good way. It's probably going to tell me something like, if the magistrate's the main character, here's the thing, but I think it's not the magistrate because, and it'll tell you why. Um, so this gives you some actionable places just to track what you have. If you have character archetypes that are missing here, you have beats that are missing here, you have world building elements that are missing here, you go chapter by chapter and it says there's no world building in this chapter. Those are all things to start notating. So you could say here, it's not accurate. It's just very blunt and to the point. The magistrate appears in the story, but he is not the sustained point of view character. He does not carry the primary emotional or narrative arc. Lamette is the clear protagonist because of her POV time, the driving goals. She's the viewpoint character, yada, yada, yada. And sometimes it'll go, oh, well, yeah, you have two, and you can list more than one. You could say it's the magistrate and Lamette if you wanted to. So again, we're not revising yet, even though we go through all these things. Let's say we go in here, we do world building on a chapter level. We are notating, we're making notes. If I really did want the magistrate to be the POV character, I would save this to notes. And your notes are all housed in the top right corner here. This is where you're going to start writing ideas of things you want to change. I like to make a cog board, like sticky board, because, you know, the wall in my house. I'll go to add a note board and change it to timeline view and put dev edit create. And here I have a beautiful thing with columns. I can label whatever I want. Rows, I can label whatever I want. And I'm going to start putting information that needs to change. For example, main character. Magistrate is not showing as the main character. And because I saved that note down here, ta-da, I now have the reason it doesn't think he's the main character. I can copy part of that note or the whole note, paste it in here, and decide what action items I want to make from this when I do get around to revising. So I can say, okay, I want him to be the main character. So he needs to be the primary POV, introduced first, has the most page time, has clearer goals, all those missing reasons that it gave for him not working. And I'm not going to go fix it through the whole book. I'm going to finish running my analysis, but this gives me the building blocks for what I'm then going to turn into my polished final draft instead of my chaos draft. And there's a lot that goes into developmental editing, which is why this is split into 2 weeks. But let's just recap here. When you finish your book, you're going to either send it to an alpha reader or you're going to do your own developmental edit on it and then maybe send it to beta readers. An effective reverse outline should leave you with clear, actionable next steps for revision. It won't be complete yet. You need to get through the developmental edit in full to have a complete frame to build your story on. In the dinosaur example, here's your dinosaur bone box. Next week, I'm going to show you how you would actually build it once you have this down. But you're creating the connecting tissues that are needed to build this big dinosaur model in your museum. The actual revision process is going to be next on the list. So we'll be back next week to talk about that. So if you're doing this alongside us, we want you to try going through, seeing what you already have, making sure it meets the genre expectations that your readers would have. And if not, decide whether you need a new pen name and to put it out under a different genre, or whether you're going to change it to meet that new expectation. And then also track what you have. Make sure you start reorganizing where your primary beats are and leave everything else for the connecting bridges between them. And make notes for yourself of character and world building changes that need to happen as well. This is going to give you this broad picture feedback, but you have to figure out how to fix it. You're in full creative control. It's not generating content for your work, and the trade-off for not having generated content is, yay, we don't have to disclose generated content. But the downside is it can't make editing suggestions for you. So one of the services we offer here at AutoCrit is actually Story Doctor calls, where you can book a one-to-one call with us, and we will pull your system up with you. You'll pull it up, share it on the screen, and we'll go through what the results say so that you can learn what that means. If I get feedback like this, I need to make these kind of changes. So I hope that that's helpful. All right, you guys, we're going to wrap up. Everyone.
Bye.